Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I have a fun video for you guys today. Actually, to be honest, this video it's a little stressful for me. We're going to be talking about 5 palettes in my collection that I just can't seem to declutter, but I kind of feel like maybe I should. These are palettes that, for whatever reason, I'm not using these palettes nearly enough, but I can't bring myself to let them go. So we're going to go through them today. I'm hoping that you guys can maybe help me out a little bit. In fact, let's make a goal by the end of the video. I know this is kind of a pathetic goal, but let's make a goal, or more specifically, I want you guys to vote on the one palette you think I should go ahead and cut loose, the one I should declutter. And maybe some of the other ones you guys can talk me into keeping and actually using. So I hope you guys are intrigued to see what palettes made the cut, or I should say maybe might not make the cut. It should be fun. I think there's a couple in here that might surprise or even shock you guys. Before we get into the palettes, I want to send a special welcome to any new visitors to my channel. Welcome. I hope that you enjoy this video. If you do, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and make sure that you are subscribed before you leave. With that said, let's get to it. So these are in no particular order. We're just gonna grab them and dig in at random. Let's start with this one right here. This is from e.l.f. This is the e.l.f. New Classics palette. I feel like this is a palette I should love and should use. I'm quite frankly a little baffled that I just don't ever seem to want to reach for this palette. I don't know quite what it is. I have used it a handful of times and I've really enjoyed it when I have used it. The formulas are all really nice. You get great range in here from light to dark, some really beautiful shimmers. Normally those are all things that I love in a palette, so I can't quite figure out what it is about this one that I just keep forgetting. I know a lot of people love this palette. The only thing I can possibly think is that maybe this palette is just a little bit too neutral for me. I do sometimes like something in a palette that's going to kind of draw me in, even if it's a color that I might not often use, something that makes me feel kind of inspired, and maybe there's not a shade that's quite like that in here. I'm not 100% sure. I do have neutral palettes that are just as neutral as this one that I tend to reach for more often. Let me know, should I keep this palette? Should I pass it along? Would you guys like to see me pull it into a video? Or is it too boring even for you guys? And it has been out for a while, so maybe nobody's interested in this palette anymore. Let me know what you guys think. I don't know what it is about this that I just have not given this the love that I figured I might. Next up, I have the Juvia's Place Walhalla palette. I know exactly why this palette is coming in here. I've talked quite a few times about this palette and how it's just a little colorful for my somewhat boring taste. This is very, very colorful. There are some beautiful shades in here, and I will admit there are some very unique shades in here that are very special within my existing eyeshadow palette collection. But it's not super often that I reach for a palette just for one specific shade, and then I have to reach for something else that has neutrals. There's not a lot of neutrals inside this palette. I mean, you get like these 3, I guess I would, maybe these 4 I'd consider kind of neutral. Everything else is quite colorful, and there are a lot of shades in here that I just don't see myself ever using unless I'm just, not just in a creative mood, I mean in like I'm going, like maybe I'm performing in a circus. And I don't say that at all to shame anyone that is into colorful looks. I secretly wish I was that bold to do my makeup in bold, colorful ways, but I'm just not. I'm kind of a boring makeup or eyeshadow person. I don't often reach for super bold, colorful shades, and certainly not super bold, colorful glitters. I probably should have known that when I was investigating purchasing this palette. I think more than likely what happened with this palette was released around the beginning of COVID, kind of when everybody was stuck in their house and kind of going stir crazy. So I kind of feel like this palette was a bit of like retail therapy for me. I just kind of bought it thinking it would make me feel better, and I'll be honest, it did. I was excited about it. I just haven't used it very much since then. And I don't imagine that I'll use it super often, with the exception of a couple of shades. This purpley blue right here is really beautiful and is quite unique within my collection, and I do love a good duochrome, and I don't have a ton of them, so I almost feel like I'm keeping this whole palette just for that one shade. I'm sure this could be a really fun one. I sort of want to keep it around because I don't have a lot of colorful palettes in case I want to do some sort of like makeup outside of my comfort zone look, or some sort of makeup bingo game or something. I don't know. Do you guys think I should keep this one? Would you at all be interested in seeing me do something like with this section over here? Let me know down below. I would consider doing it. There's a part of me that thinks that could be fun, but it's definitely not something that I use regularly. And as much as I love the Juvia's Place palette, I'm very happy with the colorful shades I have within not just other Juvia's Place palettes, but honestly within my collection. So I don't know that I necessarily need to keep this one. Let me know if you guys have strong feelings one way or the other. I'm kind of on the fence about this one, but this is definitely one of the ones that's likely at the top of my chopping block that might get the cut first. But I don't know, even still, I still have a hard time really making that decision, letting it go. Let's stick with the colorful. Next up is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Riviera palette. Oh, I love the packaging of this palette. I'm such a fan of navy blue. Is one of my favorite colors. Black and navy blue are like my two favorite colors of all time. And even more than navy blue, I love navy blue stripes and all things nautical sort of looking. So this packaging, I want to keep it just for the packaging. It is a pretty palette. It's obviously very, very colorful. I did do a 7 looks on this palette when it was first released. I think this thing's been out now for a couple of years. I'll be honest, I don't get a ton of use out of it, with the exception of like these 2 blues. I do on occasion, like every few months, pull this palette out just for a blue toned look because I do really love these blues. But I actually have more blues now in my collection than I did when I first got this palette. And while I don't have necessarily exact dupes for these 2 blues right here, I have similar shades within my collection that are kind of that silvery, steely blue. So I don't know that I need to keep the whole palette just for those 2 shades. There are a lot of other shades in here that I think are beautiful as well, but there's a whole lot of shades in here I just don't think I'll get a lot of use out of, including this bold pink right here. I have other pinks and purples that are similar to these ones right here, actually even within other Anastasia palettes. I don't like the bronze inside this palette. It's my least favorite bronze in my entire collection. I have a whole lot of bronzes, so I'm not sure why that is. This bronze just does not look very good, either on my skin tone or on my eyes. I don't know if it's a color or a texture thing, but every time I've used that a few times and I've always disliked it when I've used it. I do, however, really, really love this matte white. I do have a matte white now from Sydney Grace, which I think is a really good formula. It's really nice and rich and creamy. I still don't know that I have a matte white in my collection though that competes with this thing. It's like white paint. It's seriously intense, and while I don't reach for it often, every time I pull out this palette and I see that matte white, I think of all the things that that specific matte white could do for other looks with other palettes. Like, I just think that's such a good staple shade. I almost want to depot this. In fact, that's a consideration. Maybe I could depot this shade and then pass the rest of the palette on to someone else. I don't know. Depotting sounds a little tricky to me. I know a lot of you guys probably have this palette, or at least some of you have this palette or duplicates for this palette. I know that C Color Cosmetics makes a duplicate for this one. What do you guys think? Should I keep it around? Should I try and pull it into some future videos or shop my stashes? Let me know what you guys think, because this is another one that I think is kind of towards the top. Next up is a palette that I've had for a long time, and I think I've only done 1 or 2 looks from this palette, which blows my mind because this has been around a long time. It's been raved about a long time here on YouTube, and it is the original Jaclyn Hill palette. This is a really beautiful palette. I am still considering doing a 7 looks with this palette. In fact, I do have a poll that will be going up very shortly for you guys on which palette you would like to see me do a 7 looks video with. In that poll will be some old palettes like this one and some new palettes like the new Natasha Denona. So we will see. If this palette does win in that poll, I will keep it at least around till I do a 7 looks video with it. I definitely feel like I should give it more of a shot before I declutter this. I think this palette just kind of got lost in the shuffle. I think it's a little large and overwhelming for me, and it's not even, I don't mind a large palette. For example, I love the So Jaded palette by Kathleen Lights and ColourPop, but that one I feel like has more variety in it, whereas this one, like this whole middle section right here, I feel like there's so many similarities there that it kind of makes my head spin a little bit. Like, I'm not sure which shade to dip into, or I'm worried that like if I went in with this transition shade, maybe I'd mix it up and go in with this one on the other eye, and then they'd look different but not totally different because they're sort of the same but they're also not the same. I'm kind of just guessing here, but I do see a lot of repetitiveness in here. Maybe not dupes, but a lot of repetitiveness, and I never like that in a palette, even if it's just 1 or 2 shades that seem to sort of mimic each other. That seems to be the case with a lot of these larger Morphe palettes. It's one of the reasons I don't own a lot of them. But let me know what you guys think. I know this is a staple palette for so many people, and it has been for a long time. There's still a lot of people, I still get comments from people that say this is like their #1 holy grail palette. I do believe the formula of this palette has changed just a little bit. In fact, right before I was initially considering doing a 7 looks video with this palette, I saw Jen Loves Reviews come out and do a video where she swatched the original one, which this is, I believe, the original packaging, the original formula, and she swatched it with the new released version of this palette, and she did find that some of the colors and formulas had changed just a little bit. Seems a little silly for me to hang on to it, but again, for whatever reason, I have a hard time letting this one go, because every time I see this or pull this out or think about it, I think I need to give that palette a shot and get to know it a little better. But it's been a couple years and I still don't know this palette hardly at all. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you guys have any strong opinions on this one. Should I let it go or should I give it a shot? Let me know down below. All right, last palette. This one kind of is painful for me. I will just say this, I don't think this one is going to be on the chopping block. This is definitely in last place as far as the ones would be the least, in first place, let me rephrase that. This will be the least likely to get decluttered. I'm not really looking to declutter this palette, but as I was looking through my collection and trying to figure out, okay, which palettes am I just not using very much at all, shockingly, this is one of the palettes that made that list. This is seriously going to shock some of you guys. This was once my very favorite palette of all time, but I have not been using it at all for the last almost a year. It is the Urban Decay Born to Run palette. Pick your chins up off the floor. I'm sure you guys are shocked. I'm not saying this is a bad palette. I still am very attached to this palette. I love it. I think it's great packaging. I really like the Urban Decay formula, but the more that I've tried over the years, I won't say this is my favorite formula anymore. I do think the color story in here is really fun, really beautiful. If you don't have a lot of palettes in your collection, you want just like one palette that's going to give you a whole lot of variety, plenty of neutrals, and a little bit of color, this is the perfect color story for that. I do like the Urban Decay formula. I think their matte formula is nice. Their shimmer formula is a solid 7, I would say, but there are a lot of formulas out there, especially with the shimmers, that I think are better and I think perform a little bit better. The biggest thing holding back from using this palette is I got a ton of use out of it for a while, and then I have just collected so many other palettes since then. I've discovered some new and better formulas for me, and I have too many. I think that's the biggest thing, is I just have too many palettes, and this thing's kind of old, so I don't get very excited to reach for it anymore. I am going to keep it around because I know a lot of you guys own this palette. I think it's a good one to pull into, full face of nothing news every now and then, or shop my stashes, or just trying out old makeup. I do really like it. It's been a long time since I felt compelled to pull this thing back out and give it some use, and I do remember the last time I used it, which I don't know exactly when that was, but I really noticed that the formula was not as good as I originally thought that it was. It is possible that this palette is getting a little old. It is getting old. I think I've had this one for about 3 years now, but I also have other palettes that I've had for like 4 or 5 or even 6 years that I don't find the formulas seem to expire. I don't know. I just know I haven't been using this one a lot, which I think is kind of tragic. I know there are a whole lot of you out there that are probably, hopefully not offended by me mentioning this palette, because perhaps you bought this palette on my recommendation. I still think it's good. It's just not my very, very favorite in the whole world anymore. And that, you guys, is it for the 5 palettes in my collection that I just can't seem to get rid of. For whatever reason, I feel kind of attached to these, or I feel like I want to give these another chance, but I definitely have not been using them enough. And I think even since the last declutter that I did, that I think was about 4 or 5 months ago, in those videos, I'm pretty sure I mentioned that I would give some, if not all of these palettes, another shot, but I still haven't. I still have not felt compelled to use them and give them a try or get some use out of them. So I don't know. Should I get rid of them? It seems pointless to keep them around to just gather dust. But as a lover of eyeshadows and a collector of eyeshadow palettes, it's an awfully hard thing for me to do. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Please leave me a note down below. Vote down below. Which one do you think I should declutter? If it was you, which one would you let go of? Especially if you kind of have been watching me for a while, you kind of know what my tastes are. You know one of these maybe doesn't suit me quite as well. I don't know, or you're just not interested in really seeing in any future videos. Vote down below and let me know which one you'd like to see me declutter, and I am gonna do it. I think for at least one of these, it is time to part with. Probably the rest of them, we'll see what happens in my next declutter. These will definitely be on the chopping block. But that's all I have for you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was interesting for you. Hopefully I didn't hurt anyone's feelings. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. I want to remind you one more time, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would love if you would do that before you leave. But that's all for now. Thanks again, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Welcome aboard. That's likely at the top of the chalking. Why can't I say that?